Oh shoot, that's a bug. Hey y'all, welcome back to another day of Vlogmas. So instead of having a vlog, I'm finally going to be doing a sit-down video. This time we're going to be going over some of the bourbon tour because, as I've discussed a couple of times and y'all have been seeing, I have been working through the bourbon passport. I'm almost done. At this point, when I am recording this, I have 8 more to go, and the day after I record this, I am going to be hitting up 3 different distilleries because they're all within a pretty close couple of miles of each other. So that's why I thought I'm not going to rank every single distillery that I've gone to because I've been going to them for a couple of years now, and sometimes I've kind of forgotten a couple of things. So instead, I thought we'd give a few awards to some of the different distilleries that I've gone to kind of highlight which ones I think you should go to if you're in Kentucky and you want to go to someplace. So, cheers. Fun fact, this was the bourbon, this single barrel Knob Creek that was about 9 years. This was the bourbon that I opened after I sent out my dissertation. So I'm just slowly working through it. It was initially my celebratory bourbon, but bourbon is meant to be drunk, not stored. So I am going through it because honestly, from one thing I've heard, after about 6 months, it doesn't go bad per se, but really you don't want to leave it open to the air after 6 months. Otherwise, you'd want to, for example, get it resealed. At least that's what I'd heard from Buffalo Trace. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is if you are interested in going to one of the craft distilleries and you want one that has kind of a fun history, especially if you want to learn about the history of bourbon. In that case, I would recommend James E. Pepper. So this one is one that is in Lexington in the distillery district, and originally the entire distillery district used to be a one big distillery that I believe its name was James E. Pepper. If not, it was owned by James E. Pepper. I know that much for sure. And James E. Pepper was a big name in bourbon. He was part of that first ever class action lawsuit that was for like consumer protection in the discussion about like bottles and bond for bourbon, because they had all these different bottlers who were adding extra stuff to the bourbon and making it. That's why there's the old idea that bourbon tasted really bad, is because people would literally, these bottlers would add things like chewing tobacco or like formaldehyde. So him and E.H. Taylor, who is another big name for bourbon, both of them are Kentucky colonels like Colonel Sanders, they petitioned the US government to allow them to bottle their own bourbon. And so yeah, that's where we get the first ever Consumer Protection Act. But yeah, so go to the James E. Pepper distillery if you want to learn really about the history of bourbon, at least as they discuss it. James E. Pepper was the first one to really popularize the old-fashioned, which, as y'all know, I love me a good old-fashioned. The next one that I think everybody should go to because it's so fun, and again, it's on that craft vibe, it's on the craft tour, is specifically Second Sight Spirits. So you can see it right here. I love Second Sight Spirits. I've taken friends to it. I tell everybody, if you have a chance, go to Second Sight Spirit Distilling. The owners worked at one point for Cirque du Soleil. They're both engineers. They're both got a crazy story. The fact that their still is designed to look like a fortune teller. Their drinks are incredible, and they are just having fun. They're so curious. They talk about the fact that their history isn't as like grand as some of the big like heritage brands, or even like either Old Pog or, oh shoot, that's a bug. Well, I'm just gonna let that bug stay there for right now because yeah, also again, I am sorry if I keep on looking over at my screen. I'm trying to make sure I look at my camera. But as I was saying with Second Sight Spirit, they've just got a great story to them, and I think they deserve all of the love that we can give them. They are very much on that smaller side, and they just now, I think they really only had about 3 to 4 people working there. Now they've added on a few more. Yeah, it keeps on moving. Let me show y'all. that bug right there. I think I'd heard him earlier, and now I see him for sure. Okay, so back to what we were talking about. So like I was saying, Second Sight Spirit Distilling. If you're in Northern Kentucky, I do highly recommend it. The next one, if you're interested in bourbon, but you are more of like a Irish whiskey fan, or you like beers, or you're a gin person even, that one I would actually recommend Town Branch, which also is Lexington Brewing Company. Lexington Brewing Company makes one of my favorite beers. It's not my absolute favorite, but they do make the vanilla bean cream ale, which tastes like a cream soda. I do highly recommend it. It is also, for beers, the most popular one, like Kentucky beer, especially the one that you can find outside of the state. So if you go on a tour of Town Branch / Lexington Brewing Company, you'll end up getting 4 different tokens. And these tokens are used for you to get different drinks. So you can try their different beers, as well as some of their different bourbons, as well as Irish whiskeys, because they have a sister distillery in Ireland, since the owner, or the original owner, he's now deceased, but the original owner of the distillery is from Ireland and had worked with Jameson and Guinness back in the day. He was a chemical engineer by trade and came over to the United States during the oil crisis. So I would say go to them, because they also do have things like a rhubarb gin, or at least they used to, as well as I'm now blanking on one of their other cocktails, or not cocktails, but it's like liqueurs. This video is just going to be a lot of me being like, okay, blah blah blah, blah bug. Highly recommend if you are looking for different, to try different samples of things. That one, because the liqueur I'm talking about, is the drink that they'll make is called a Kentucky Sundown, which uses boiling hot water, as it's this very thick, syrupy kind of liqueur. So, prettiest location. In this case, there are 2 distilleries. This is the first time we're really getting into distilleries that are like big names that most people would recognize. And that is Buffalo Trace, which of course it is a very beautiful one. It is a historic site in Kentucky, and they put a lot of effort into maintaining their grounds. It gets used for weddings a lot of times, and part of that is due to actually one of their older distillers way back in the day, E.H. Taylor, who I mentioned earlier. He was huge on making it all look really beautiful. There is an entire brick house. I think I've got a photo here of it. That kind of pissed off his actual business partner. But yes, a very beautiful distillery. And again, E.H. Taylor did other really beautiful distilleries like Castle and Key. Again, Castle and Key literally has a well that is designed to look like a keyhole. That's where that key comes from, and the distillery is a castle. So yeah, beautiful locations. The other one, and this is coming from a Californian like myself, is Four Roses. Four Roses, as you can see here, looks like a Spanish mission, except it looks better than most of the Spanish missions in California, because the ones in California are falling apart. This looks like something you'd find at like California Adventure, and it's bright yellow, and it really sticks out, especially on a gray day in Kentucky in the winter, which is the first time for me that I went to Four Roses was November 12th. The reason I remember is that was my grandmother's birthday, and she was a huge bourbon person. And I'm driving up, and I'm just like, that's bright, because it's like a bright yellow, and it's very much in style for like the 1900s, where they were kind of the fetishization of Spanish architecture, like Mexican Spanish architecture. So yeah, really beautiful location. Highly recommend. Both of those, however, are a little bit harder to get tours, but you can just walk onto the properties and kind of wander around a little bit. With Buffalo Trace, you can go to the gift shop. With Four Roses, they do have a bar there. So next thing that we're going to talk about is most interesting tour. So in this case, I've got, again, 2 different answers, and they're very dependent on what you're looking for and where you are. If you're more in the Louisville area and you're kind of doing that Bourbon Street, because Louisville has this like road near the Kentucky River that has a bunch of different distilleries, or that's where they host a lot of their tours. And in this case, Evan Williams, the Evan Williams Experience, is one of my favorites. It's very campy. They have like little reenactments in points, like recordings of these reenactments, and just these huge models of things as you're like charring the barrels, or as you're walking through just a town during the Prohibition, and like you're trying some of the bourbons in just this like room that looks almost like a pharmacy, because back in the Prohibition era, you would get a prescription for bourbon, actually, or whiskeys. This was before we had any of the legislation on designating what is a bourbon, what is a rye, all of that. So that one is really fun, really campy. The other one that I honestly really liked is actually Willet. So with Willet, what happens is as you're walking along the property, you'll be testing different bourbons or trying different bourbons. You get different options, and they'll sometimes be pulling this right from the barrel with a whiskey thief as you're going into the different like areas, as you're learning about how they distill, how they barrel, and of course their cats are gorgeous. They're so cute. I always love distilleries for their cats too. That's always a fun one. But yeah, so those two are the ones that I would recommend, and actually Willet is the one that gives you, I think these are called tulip glasses. I will add somewhere down here what the actual proper name for these glasses are. And this has been my favorite glass to use for my bourbon, since I have found that I actually prefer to drink my whiskey neat. Just like the Hosier song, I find that usually if I add an ice cube, it ends up watering it down too much. So I just want the nice taste. The only problem is right now my lips are chapped, which means that the alcohol burns that too. God. The next one is going to be in that same vein of the prettiest location, is going to be the one that you can get some of the best photos. And in this case, that's different than the prettiest location. That is actually Maker's Mark. They've got the sheep there, which is fun because it looks like an actual working farm there. And then the other thing is that they've got a couple of different like artifacts or like art pieces. So they've got some of these different art pieces here, as well as a stained glass that theoretically shows the process of making bourbon. It was Dave Chihuly. They have a Dave Chihuly, as you can see right here. That's actually what my lock screen on my phone is. I thought it was so beautiful that this was there. So I do think it kind of has some of the best photo opportunities if you're looking for that. They've got these great areas that are staged also if you want to take photos in front of like a rick with the different barrels. And you can see they have barrels pulled down because they're testing them, and then they're going to be putting in different stays that are like of different woods. As you know, with Makers, they'll have like Makers 46, which adds extra stays in there. So I definitely think it's one of the like places if you're looking for any good photos, because yeah, if you're going to be in Kentucky, might as well get some good photos of you with bourbon. Like get some good photos of you with bourbon, because you're probably not going to get a good photo with a horse. Now we're kind of moving into a few other of the bourbon like sections. One of them is what is kind of the best old fashioned, and so this time it will be log still. So I went to log still actually the same day I went to Makers back in 2023. And they had this really good old fashioned. I don't know if it's changed or not, because also when I was there, they were private labeling their bourbon. So they went to a company in Indiana that just makes a bunch of different bourbons with the different mash bills, and they were private labeling it. This was just at the time because they had just started up production, so they only had barrels. They had not aged to a point that they were really happy with the flavor yet, which is understandable. That's why with some distilleries like Second Sight Spirit Distilling, they use very small barrels. Same thing with Hartford & Co. They'll start off with these smaller barrels so you can age them faster. Log Still decided to use the traditional 53-gallon barrels, and they were just private labeling instead. And with Log Still, they've got a massive production. So with that, though, they had these bourbons, and they were pretty decent. And then they made the Old Fashioned, and with the Old Fashioned, actually, it was a burnt sugar Old Fashioned. So they used Demerara sugar and burned it a little bit, charred it, so it's a little bit more caramelly. And then they also used plum bitters. Well, plum, for those who don't know, is actually one of the main flavors in Tutti Frutti, so when you actually smelled it, it smelled like bubblegum. And it was just this very good old-fashioned. I would highly recommend that one. Log Still is also great because they have a lot of different concerts, so it's kind of a fun place, but be aware that Log Still does not have great reception at all. I lost it about 2/3 of the way onto the drive, so that was kind of scary because I was in an area I did not know, since most of Kentucky is still very, very rural. It's also a problem that happened to me when I was going to some of the distilleries out in the western region for the craft tours, because they are like, there's just nothing there. I just kind of had to be like, I remember approximately what my like drive was. And now we're finally getting on to the best bourbons. And note that this can change over time. My flavor, like the stuff that I prefer, has changed. I went from somebody who I wanted something very caramelly and very sweet, and still if I'm getting a bourbon, I would prefer it to be more on the caramelly side. So say like a double oak is one of the ones I really like. The same reason I do really enjoy Angel's Envy. But like, I also have become, as I comment, I'm more of a rye girl. That was like one of those things I was really sad about when I went to Casey Jones. They'd run out of their rye, so they weren't going to serve it to us. And I was like, but that's the one I wanted to try. So instead I had a bunch of other ones, because also, like, I was with a couple, like these two couples, and one of the guys was not drinking, so they were just handing out all of the cups, which definitely was not legal, since you're only allowed 2 ounces. As it turns out, I thought it was 1 ounce, but you're allowed 2 ounces of bourbon. We were getting a lot more than that, but I got to try a lot of their different things. We'll start off with their favorite rye. My favorite rye is Rabbit Hole's rye, called Boxer Grail, named after actually the boxer Muhammad Ali, who is from Louisville, because Rabbit Hole's in Louisville, and most of their bourbons and just whiskeys in general are named after people from Louisville, but using kind of a Lewis Carroll naming convention. So Boxer Grail, because he was a boxer and he was kind of the holy grail of boxing. However, when I was also at that distillery and we're trying that, this one woman on the tour is like, oh, did Muhammad Ali ever try it? And I was like, woman, hey, by the time this distillery was created, Muhammad Ali was severely from dementia. Like, he would not have had the wherewithal generally, even if he was not already a Muslim reaver. Muslims do not drink, and Muhammad Ali was a very devout Muslim. So like, yeah, no. Although I was annoyed at my dad because I told him the story and he's like, I remember when he's Cassius Clay. And I'm like, are you just upset that he decided to revert and changed his name when your own mother-in-law, my maternal grandmother, also changed not only her last name when she got married, but she's also changed her first name? Then we're actually going to get into the best bourbons, and this one actually was Neely. So the bourbon I just tried, I really, really liked their finished bourbons a lot. I thought they were like delicious, and that was both for their wheated and their high rye, as well as like just generally their drinks overall I thought were pretty good. So I would very much recommend, if you can, go and do a tasting at Neely. They are not joking. Like, I can see how they have won so many competitions. It's just a distiller's kiss. Their master taster / master blender, oh man, she is worth her weight in gold. So like, it's all over the place, but that's kind of the fun thing, is Kentucky can have everything all over the place with their different bourbons, and you'll get all these different kind of flavors and stories, because Kentucky is a very diverse state. The reason with this bourbon passport, we actually end up having not only just like the normal stuff like Stitzel and Weller, that's in the Louisville area, or you get, like, we have all the stuff in Bardstown, like let's see, like Jim Beam is in Bardstown, or not officially in Bardstown, but in Bardstown, which is the bourbon capital of the world. Those are two very different locations. They're about an hour plus apart, but you'll get very different stories. And then you have instances like Old Pog in northern Kentucky, which, like, I've heard Maysville, which is like the quaintest small town, and I wanted to go check it out, but I did not trust the road going back at night, because it was going to be in kind of, we're getting close to Appalachia. There was no street lights, and I was like, not doing this in a very hilly area. Also, I accidentally went into somebody's private parking lot. That was awkward. But yeah, you can have all these fun distilleries and all these fun different stories just in this one place. So I highly recommend going on a couple of different ones. If y'all have questions, I can give recommendations on different distilleries, especially based off the area you're in. If you're in Louisville, just stay with the Louisville distilleries. If you're in like Lexington area, I would say do both some of the Lexington and then also drive down to Bardstown, because Bardstown is about an hour away, and you can hit up 2 or 3 different distilleries there. And that's especially where you'll get some of those big names. Those are really the 2 main spots I think you'd be. Northern Kentucky also has some great distilleries. And you can also go up to Cincinnati, actually more for their beers since they've got a strong German influence there. But yeah, all of those highly recommend. So yeah, I hope y'all liked my little like kind of ranking listing of just some of the best, in my opinion, bourbons and distilleries in the state. Please let me know if you want more bourbon content. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!